They gave my promotion to someone I trained. I stood there, in a room full of clapping hands, while my name was never even mentioned. Not once. I'd rehearsed that morning like a full blazer steamed, speech polished, even my shoes cleaned with one of those ridiculous travel wipes I keep in my purse, just in case. And this was the case. The company had sent out an all-staff email, exciting leadership announcement at 1:00 a.m. It was supposed to be my moment. I was told no, promised this role 2 quarters ago. Quietly, of course, in those hallway conversations filled with winks and just be patient smiles. I believed them. After 14 years, I thought I'd earned believing. When the CEO walked on stage with his signature over-rehearsed grin and began describing someone who has brought fresh energy and a dynamic voice to our client experience, I still smiled. I thought he was talking about me. But then he said the name. Noah Vance. My own junior. The kid who still forwards calendar invites without time zones. The one who once asked if QBR stood for Quick Brand Review. That Noah. The room exploded in applause. I stood there frozen, like a trophy that nobody won, still placed on the shelf. And then Noah turned to me, still smiling. Couldn't have done it without her, he said. Not to thank me, to own me. You know that moment? When your stomach sinks, your ears burn, and the only thing louder than the applause is your own silence? Yeah. Have you ever been erased in plain sight and expected to clap along? If you have, drop a comment below that says, I see you. Because here at Revenge Tales, we don't forget. And we don't go quietly. Keep watching. Because while they were busy handing out titles, I was already building the exit that would tear everything down. 14 years. That's how long I gave them. Not in hours, or weeks, or quarterly milestones. In birthdays missed. Weekends blurred. Holiday dinners taken over by just one quick deck or last-minute procurement call. I started at Beacon Rise when it was just 6 people in a rented co-working space that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. We didn't have a client onboarding process back then. We didn't even have clients. But I stayed. I built the customer strategy framework from scratch, long before anyone thought of naming a department after it. I've sat on floors with my laptop propped on a recycling bin. I've carried servers into offices before sunrise. And when the first enterprise client finally signed on, I was the one who convinced legal to close in under 8 hours. That client still brings in 8 figures annually. But you won't find my name anywhere near the announcement slides. Because I was never the face. I was the glue. I was the person you looped in when everything was falling apart and nobody knew how to fix it without burning bridges. I wrote the playbooks. Translated tech jargon into language clients could actually understand. Mediated between engineers who barely spoke and account managers who oversold integrations we didn't have. People joked that I could calm a storm with a Google Doc. They weren't wrong. But here's the thing about being good at fixing things: people expect you to keep doing it. Invisibly. You stop being a person and start becoming infrastructure. At some point, they stopped saying thank you. They just sent another calendar invite. And when someone new joined someone like Noah, they handed him a headset and said, stick close to Reagan. She knows everything. So I did what I always did. I taught. I guided. I made sure he didn't drown on day 1. I cleaned up his emails when he confused renewal dates with onboarding schedules. I even rewrote a proposal he accidentally submitted as a JPEG. He was eager, shiny, polished in that startup conference way. He knew how to drop buzzwords into every sentence like seasoning, scalable, nimble, ecosystem alignment, even if none of it made sense. But he had the look. And, apparently, that's what mattered. The higher-ups started tagging him in threads I used to lead. He began getting invites to strategy offsites I'd helped organize. I watched it all quietly. Because silence was how I survived. They told me my time would come. You're the backbone of this team, Reagan. You're indispensable. Just be patient. So I stayed patient. and stayed late. While Noah posted LinkedIn selfies from panels I prepped him for, I spent my evenings documenting cross-region risk flags and rebuilding client escalation matrices. He smiled for the spotlight. I rewired the stage. There's something no one tells you about being dependable. You become forgettable. Reliable enough to trust, invisible enough to overlook. But I didn't mind not at first. I thought the work would speak for itself. Spoiler, it doesn't Presension. By the time the CCO title opened up, I knew better. I had led the client experience overhaul. Landed the 3 most profitable renewals of the fiscal year. I had results, loyalty, and memory on my side. But still, I wasn't the one they chose. And that choice? It didn't start the story. It just revealed what had been true all along. They never planned to reward the person who built the foundation. Just the one who looked better, standing on it. Noah Vance looked exactly like the kind of guy who gets promoted in a glossy company brochure. Tall, always in tailored navy, suits never black, never bold. Safe. Charming in the way elevator pitches are charming. Quick, surface, deep, slightly rehearsed. His hair was never out of place. His teeth? Blinding. And his handshake was firm without ever being personal. When he first joined, he asked me where the client strategy playbook lived. I told him it didn't exist because I was the playbook. So, I built him one. A condensed version. I simplified the political maze, color-coded procurement personalities, added side notes about which CTOs liked data dashboards and which ones preferred phone calls over email. He thanked me with a donut from downstairs. One of those overly sweet maple ones no one ever finishes. Still, I didn't mind. I'd been a mentor before. Helping him felt like helping the company. That was before he started parroting my frameworks word for word in meetings without attribution. Before I found one of my original decks copy-pasted into his proposal, my footnotes removed but the formatting intact. He called it his approach. I bit my tongue. Again. Because that's what professionals do, right? We lift others. We stay above it. We wait. Noah didn't even know how to read a room at first. He'd fumble through conversations, interrupt procurement leads mid-sentence, and once referred to a critical account as low lift in front of their CFO. I cleaned it up. Every time. I would gently say, what Noah means to suggest is, and salvage the deal. Again. He got better because I carried him. And when he didn't crash, they assumed it was because he could fly. Soon, execs started inviting him to meetings I wasn't copied on. They'd send me follow-ups asking for context or prep slides, pretending I hadn't just been ghosted from my own work. Noah would stroll in, crack a joke, use the phrase brand adjacency completely wrong, and get nods of approval from people who didn't even know what our clients actually needed. It's amazing what confidence can cover up, especially when it's wrapped in the right look. They wanted someone forward-facing, energetic, aligned with our future-facing values. That's what they said. What they meant was, he photographs well at conferences. And me? I was told I was mission-critical, but better behind the scenes. The backbone. The builder. The one you rely on. But never spotlight. It was easier to market Noah. To point at him and say, this is what innovation looks like. Byman. Even though his innovation was just me. Slightly misquoted. Presented with better lighting. The worst part? He didn't even know. He genuinely believed he earned it all. Believed that working past 6 p.m. once a week was grinding. That being loud in a meeting was the same as being right. That charisma could replace competence. And maybe in their eyes, it could. He became the face of a department I built with sleepless nights and broken weekends. And when they gave him my promotion, they didn't just hand over a title. They handed him my pipeline. My relationships. My name. The face they wanted. Wasn't the one who held the weight. It was the one who smiled the loudest. It started with a stray notification. An automated email flagged for my review. A quarterly contract renewal coming due for one of our legacy clients. Nothing unusual except I hadn't handled that account in nearly a year. I stared at the subject line for a moment, confused. Was this an error? Did someone forget to update the contact info? Curious, I opened our internal contract tracker. You'd think after a public promotion, a restructured org chart, and an entire team realignment, someone would have taken the time to legally transfer signature authority. But they didn't. They'd plastered Noah's name across Slack, the website, even the conference press kits. But on paper? On the documents that actually mattered, it was still mine. My name. Still at the bottom of our top 10 highest value client contracts. Still listed as the primary signatory. Still legally binding. I froze. Not out of fear, but something else. Something deeper. A kind of slow, cold clarity. They had taken my seat. My title. My voice. But they forgot the roots. You don't rip out the foundation and expect the house to stay standing. And they never touched the foundation. Because they never looked. I started checking. Quietly. Patiently. One deal at a time. The result? 8 out of 10 legacy contracts dating back 5, even 7 years still had my credentials attached. Not as a collaborator, as the signer. The legal representative of record. Which meant that if a client wanted to escalate, renegotiate, or even terminate service, they had to go through me. And here's the wild part, those clients still trusted me. They still thought I ran the show. Because no one had told them otherwise. Because no one bothered to transition the relationships. Noah might have been the new face, but I was still the handshake they remembered. All those late nights, all that meticulous documentation, the way I always made sure every single client felt seen, it was still alive. Still working in my favor. They'd overlooked me so completely. They left the door wide open. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt positioned. This wasn't sabotage. This was neglect on their part. And the beautiful thing about being underestimated? No one watches what you do next. By the end of the night, I had bookmarked every contract, flagged every clause, highlighted every contact point that still looped back to me. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't angry. I was awake. They forgot to clean up the details. And I've always been the one who lived in the details. There's a special kind of calm that settles in when the storm has already passed, when you realize the destruction didn't take you down. It cleared your path. After I confirmed the contracts still had my name, I didn't yell. Didn't confront. Didn't even sigh. I opened a clean tab, typed in the Delaware Business Registry, and filed a limited liability company under a name that sounded intentionally bland. Blue Ember Partners. No fancy tagline. No press. No LinkedIn announcement. Just a quiet, legal entry in a government database. 10 minutes later, it existed. A new entity. Mine. That night, I poured a glass of Pinot Noir, not to celebrate, but to shift. Shift out of survival mode. Into strategy. They thought they won when they gave Noah the crown. But what they didn't realize was, I'd already started building the castle elsewhere. I didn't make any dramatic moves. I still showed up to every meeting. I still supported Noah, still played the loyal number 2. But after work, I built. I reviewed every NDA I'd ever signed. Cross-referenced non-compete clauses. Looked for loopholes, not emotional ones, legal ones. And I found them. The clause restricting client engagement only applied to future competitive activity post-termination. But it said nothing about preparation. Nothing about communication while employed. And absolutely nothing about forming a non-branded consulting vehicle during my tenure. So I kept going. I opened a secure cloud drive. Not to steal, but to sanitize. I created cleaner versions of old decks. Removed metadata. Simplified visuals. Reworded strategy slides into templates. No logo. No signature. Just structure. I registered a domain name. Bought a burner phone. Set up an email that didn't even contain my real name, just initials. On paper, I was no one. But behind that paper, I was everything. People often imagine revenge as loud dramatic exits, slammed doors, teary monologues in boardrooms. But real power doesn't move that way. Real power is quiet, patient. It leaves no footprint until it decides to step forward. Every night, I added something small to the infrastructure. A generic pricing matrix, a referral form, a landing page with no SEO, no bio, just a contact us field and a vague promise of agility and discretion. To anyone who stumbled across it, Blue Ember looked like one of 100 boutique consulting firms. Forgettable, faceless. And that was exactly the point. Because when the moment came, I didn't want them to trace anything back to me. I wanted them to wonder how they never saw it coming. By the end of the week, the LLC had an operational pipeline, a registered Stripe account, a waiting inbox. Still no clients. But I knew that wouldn't be the case for long, because they gave Noah the front page. But I still had the footnotes. And everyone in this industry knows. The details always live in the margins. It was a Wednesday. Cloudy, humid, the kind of day where everything feels just a little too close to the skin. I chose the cafe on purpose. Not one of those polished chain shops with corporate partnerships and contactless kiosks. This one was small, tucked between a consignment bookstore and an old florist that always smelled faintly of eucalyptus and dust. No signage, no branded mugs, just wooden tables, a humming espresso machine, and the kind of low jazz that made you whisper without knowing why. At 8:07 a.m., she walked in. Ava Jennings, senior procurement lead at one of our longest-standing clients. The kind of account companies build investor decks around. She didn't shake hands. Ava never did. She sat down, looked me in the eye, and said, "Why here?" I smiled. "Fewer ears. Better croissant." She smirked. Just slightly. Then picked up the neutral folder I'd placed on the table between us. No logos. No letterhead. Nothing corporate. Just clean formatting. Simple language. And my signature already dry. Ava flipped through the first few pages without comment. Her nails tapped once against the paper. Then she looked up. "You're leaving?" "No," I said. "Not yet." And that was the truth. Technically, I still had a Beacon Rise email. Still had a desk, though no one really visited that floor anymore. I still showed up to meetings, still smiled through Noah's awkward metaphors and misuse of the term enterprise lean. But this wasn't about leaving. This was about redirecting. Ava nodded slowly. Not surprised, maybe not even curious, just resigned. "Honestly," she said, "I'm surprised you didn't do this sooner. No drama. No questions about loyalty. Just a woman who had worked long enough to recognize when someone was done waiting to be chosen." She pulled a pen from her coat, signed the last page. And just like that, Blue Ember Partners had its first official client. Not a lead. Not a maybe. An account. The kind you don't post about. The kind that moves real money quietly and fast. We didn't take a selfie. Didn't shake hands. We both just finished our coffee and walked away in opposite directions. I didn't go back to the office that day. I walked the long way home. Past the Riverwalk, past the glass tower where Beacon Rise leased 5 floors of open concept ambition. I didn't feel guilt. Didn't feel triumph. I just felt awake. Because that meeting wasn't just a contract. It was the moment I realized I didn't need permission anymore. Have you ever made a quiet move that changed everything without asking for applause? Drop a hand icon in the comments if you've ever taken your power back in silence. That night, I opened a new bank account. Business checking. New routing number. Retainer wired. Confirmed. Noah was probably still refreshing his inbox, wondering why client feedback was taking longer than usual. But me, I wasn't waiting for feedback anymore. I was building the next move. And no one saw it coming. The first crack didn't come with a bang. It came with silence. A Thursday morning, just before 9. Noah was pacing near the kitchen again, AirPods in, trying too hard to look busy. I was across the hallway, reviewing a Q3 client churn forecast that, ironically, he never read past the headline. That's when he said it. Half mumbled. Hey, weird. Did you hear anything from Delta Wave this week? They've been kinda quiet. I looked up, slowly. Quiet how? He shrugged. No replies to follow-ups. I sent a few nudges. Nothing. I nodded, neutral. They're probably wrapping internal budget discussions, end of quarter. He seemed relieved by that answer. Almost too relieved. Like he needed someone to validate what he hoped was true. But I already knew. Delta Wave hadn't just gone quiet. They'd rerouted. To me, not through Beacon Rise. Through a private Lenino logos, no signatures, just an old connection reignited with a text that said, "We're thinking of testing something more agile. Got a minute?" And just like that, their silence had become my signal. Still, I didn't let it show. Not when the inboxes stopped buzzing. Not when calendar invites were suddenly unanswered. Not when clients started replying with delays, or, "Thanks, we'll circle back next week," and never did. Noah assumed it was just summer slowdown. A blip. He said things like, "Market's weird right now," and "People are busy, it's a seasonal lull." But I knew the difference between summer silence and strategic hesitation. The accounts weren't sleeping. They were watching. Because I wasn't just building an alternative. I was offering an escape. See, when companies get too comfortable, they stop listening. They rely on old logos, familiar names, the illusion of continuity. But clients? They remember who actually picked up the phone, who solved things before escalation, who made them feel like more than just a monthly invoice. They remembered me. So, I set the filters. Gmail rules. Subtle ones. Any message containing my name, or certain legacy project codes, or phrases like renewal options or risk forecast, would never land in the shared inbox. They'd redirect. Not to spam. Just away. Into the quiet. Noah thought he was still copied. Still looped in. But what he didn't know was that the silence he was hearing wasn't apathy. It was redirection. And Beacon Rise? They didn't even know where the conversations had gone. Because when you train people for over a decade how to trust you, not a title, not a platform, they don't need a company email to reach you. They already have your number. The cracks were getting wider. But no one was patching them. They were too busy clapping for Noah on Slack. Too busy posting about leadership growth and evolving client journeys. And I just kept listening to the silence. Because sometimes, that's where the truth starts echoing the loudest. It was almost poetic, really. Of all the ways things could have started to unravel, it began with a deleted Slack message. Late afternoon. Rain tapping against the glass like fingers trying to get in. I was cleaning up a proposal decon of the ones I used to own but now just supported. Des. A small notification blinked in the corner of my screen. Noah Vance deleted a message. From a private thread titled Client Strategy, Legacy Pipeline. Normally, I wouldn't care. But something about the timing, something about the silence that had been building made me pause. Curious, I opened the admin dashboard. See, years ago, I had been part of a system migration project. Boring, technical, thankless. But somewhere in the shuffle, I'd been granted elevated admin privileges. And like most things in that placino, one ever revoked them. Sloppy. I clicked into the audit log. Pulled up the timestamp. And there it was. A message from Noah to the VP. Short. Thoughtless. But revealing. Do I still need to CC her on these anymore? 7 words, that's all. But those 7 words told me everything. He thought I was done. Thought I was a formality. A ghost still lingering in the email chain out of habit. He didn't know I still held the signatures. The filters. The trust. He didn't know I was still in the walls. I took a screenshot. saved it in a folder labeled Continuity. Nothing dramatic. Just insurance. That was the moment I stopped feeling irritated and started feeling focused. You can erase a message, but not its intention. And, in this case, not its trail. Have you ever seen something you weren't meant to see, something they tried to quietly erase? Drop a look icon below. You're not alone, and you're not imagining it. Noah didn't mention it the next day. Of course not. He probably thought the deletion made it disappear. That's the difference between someone who builds the infrastructure and someone who benefits from it. He never stopped to wonder who set up the workflows, who created the documentation, who trained the systems to remember more than the humans ever would. And now, every message he sent, every link he shared, every step he took, it passed through tools I'd once built, permissions I still had, frameworks he didn't understand. He thought visibility meant control. But control had never been about what people saw. It was about what they missed. And while he was polishing his LinkedIn, waiting for another spotlight, I was in the code, in the client back channels, in the contracts no one updated. The audit trail was just the beginning, because for the first time in a very long time, he had left a mark. And this time, I wasn't going to clean it up. It started quietly. A calendar update slipped into the Friday afternoon slot. Q2. Forecast adjustment, leadership only. No agenda. No attachments. Just that title. If you've been in corporate long enough, you learn to read tone without words. That title? It wasn't a correction. It was a confession. I wasn't invited. Of course not. Not anymore. But I didn't need to be in the room to know what was happening. The projections they'd paraded around in all-hands meetings, the graphs with smiling arrows and green uptrends, they didn't match what was happening in the inboxes, or the pipeline, or the bottom line. Because those clients, they weren't just slow to respond. They were gone. One by one, they'd stopped renewing, delayed expansion talks, shifted budgets to alternative vendors. Noah kept trying to blame the market. Enterprise spend is tightening, he said in one meeting I was invited to. Which was funny, considering that I was receiving budget approvals. Just not at Beacon Rise. That week, I heard from a former colleague still inside finance. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. They're calling it a dip, he wrote. But it's more like a slow leak. A leak. I liked that. Not a crash, not a scandal, just quiet erosion. Every deal that had once been anchored to my name was unraveling. And the best part? It looked like no one's fault. Clients hadn't complained. There was no negative press. Just missed targets, lower revenue, and a new slide in the deck labeled Forecast Revision, under review. The chart was red. All of it. Later that day, I overheard the VP in the hallway. Voice tight. We'll spin it as market turbulence. Blame interest rates, maybe. Anything but internal misalignment. Internal misalignment. That's what they called it. Not incompetence. Not neglect. Not the fact that they'd handed the reins of client trust to someone who couldn't pronounce 3 of their account names correctly. It was turbulence. Noah stopped pacing the office that week. He started sitting still. His usual confidence, loud, casual, surface level, had thinned. You could see it in the way he gripped his coffee. Like he was waiting for it to explain what went wrong. But there were no answers at the bottom of that cup. Because the real answer was me. The same person they'd pushed to the sidelines. The same voice they muted. The same name they forgot to remove from the foundation. And now, with every line in that forecast bleeding red, they were finally realizing something I'd known all along. You can't build trust into a dashboard. You can't automate relationship memory. And you definitely can't fake legacy. By Monday, the executive team stopped using words like growth. They started saying stabilization, which is corporate code for we're bleeding and we don't know where the hole is. But I did. I'd marked it weeks ago. in the place they forgot to look. Right beneath the signature they never bothered to change. It didn't come from me. That's the first thing you need to know. I didn't send it. I didn't hint. I didn't even screenshot it myself. But someone did. And that was enough. It showed up on a niche industry forum of those gated invite-only spaces where procurement leads and vendor managers trade war stories over lukewarm takes. The post was anonymous, just vague enough to avoid legal issues, but sharp enough to draw blood. 3 major clients have quietly shifted to a boutique consultancy with no visible press or known leadership. Timeline suggests transition began during Beacon Rise's Q2 restructuring. There was no name, no branding, but within hours, someone connected the dots. Someone he always does. They matched the timing, matched the initials. They even found the domain name I thought I'd buried deep in the SEO void. And then? They found the team page. I'd put it up a week ago clean, minimal, unlisted from search engines. It wasn't meant to be flashy. It wasn't meant to trend. It was there for one purpose only. Confirmation, if you already knew where to look. 3 faces. That's all. Mine. And 2 others. A razor-sharp analyst they laid off last winter for efficiency, and a client success manager they ghosted after maternity leave. No flashy bios. No revenge manifesto. Just credentials, skill sets, and one quiet message. We're here. We never left. And we know what we're doing. By noon, the post had been screenshotted, shared, and sent across more inboxes than Beacon Rise's Q3 newsletter. By 3 p.m., someone inside the company had flagged it to legal. I imagine that's when the real panic started. Because it wasn't just a leak. It was a mirror. A quiet reflection of everything they'd missed. And everyone they'd underestimated. I didn't say a word. Didn't confirm. Didn't deny. When an old colleague messaged me with, "Is this you?" I left it on read. Because silence makes a sharper echo when everyone else is shouting. Noah, from what I heard, didn't take it well. He pulled old pitch decks. Checked client portals. Tried to find the smoking gun. But there was none. No NDA violations. No forwarded files. No traceable downloads or leaked credentials. Because I didn't need any of that. Everything I built I remembered. Every conversation. Every pain point. Every workaround. I didn't have to steal anything. I was the blueprint. By the end of the day, the CEO had added an emergency line to Monday's town hall agenda. Client retention strategy, priority response. On. But retention isn't about strategy. It's about memory. And they'd forgotten the one thing that mattered most. People don't stay because of branding. They stay because of people. And the people they chose to forget were already gone. By the time Monday rolled around, Beacon Rise had stopped pretending. The optimism in leadership's language was gone. All the exciting growth emails, the Slack posts filled with rocket ship emojis, they dried up like coffee left on a cold desk. Even the office felt different. Quieter. Not calm, just still. Like everyone was waiting for something to break, but no one wanted to be the one to touch it. Noah stopped posting on LinkedIn. That was the first sign. His daily dose of inspirational hashtags gone. No more mirror selfies at the standing desk. No more grateful to lead this amazing team. Captions. Instead, he wore the same shirt twice in a week. His voice got flatter. His jokes, those awkward metaphors he loved, dropped off completely. Then came the org chart update. Subtle. Almost like a formatting error. His title? Shifted. From VP, Client Partnerships, to Strategic Projects, Internal. No announcement. No farewell post. No thank you thread. He was moved sideways. Quietly. Like a chair no one wanted to throw away, but also didn't want to sit in anymore. The VP who championed him? Gone too. Early retirement. HR called it a graceful transition. I knew what it was. Everyone did. They gave him the NDA and the severance package with the gravel texture aftertaste. The kind you smile through while your badge is being deactivated. By Q3, the company valuations started dipping. Not enough to spark headlines, but enough to make the investor relations team nervous. New clients stopped biting. Existing ones stopped renewing. I didn't celebrate, didn't gloat, didn't post anything. I just watched. From an ocean view condo. No logos on the mugs. Just clean tile floors that stayed cool underfoot, even when the sun poured through the glass. It was the first time in years I heard my own thoughts without interruption. No calendar alerts. No Slack pings. No constant requests disguised as praise. Only, "You can handle this, Reagan." Now, I don't need to handle anything I don't choose. Power didn't look like what I thought it would. It wasn't applause. It wasn't a title. It wasn't being the one in the room. It was the freedom not to be. I still get messages from former colleagues. Some curious. Some cautious. "Where did you go? Is it true? I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I don't respond. Not because I'm cold, but because I've learned that some questions aren't really questions. They're just noise. And I don't live in noise anymore. I live in clarity. In intention. I wake up when I want. Meet who I want. Work only with people who remember what respect sounds like. There's no press release for that kind of freedom. No badge. No celebration. But it's the most powerful thing I've ever owned. They gave Noah the title. I took the foundation. And the difference? One of those things fades. The other? It redefines everything that comes after. There's something strangely quiet about real power. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't need spotlights. It doesn't wait for applause. It just moves calmly, deliberately, and suddenly the room is rearranged, and no one can quite explain how. That's what I learned. After everything. After the title, the betrayal, the silence, the rebuild. What stayed with me wasn't the victory. It was the understanding. For so long, I believed power was something you earned through patience, through loyalty, through being indispensable without ever being disruptive. And when I finally stood at the edge of that long-awaited promotion, when I watched it handed to someone else like a prop, I thought maybe I'd failed. That maybe being quiet had cost me everything. But I see it differently now. Because power isn't given. It isn't granted by a boardroom. And it sure as hell doesn't come printed on a nameplate. Power is what you keep when everything else is taken. It's the relationships you've built that don't need logos to follow you. It's the memory of every late night, every hard fix, every time you stayed and saved the thing they thought someone else could lead. It's the calm you carry when the systems you helped create start to buckle because you know exactly where the pressure points are. Power is what you own when no one is watching. And what follows you when they finally do. These days, I don't chase validation. I don't wait to be seen. I choose visibility only when it serves the work, not my ego. And here's the thing they never teach you in leadership seminars. Being the best doesn't always get you the title. But it does get you options. And in a world where most people are stuck in seats they hate, in roles they never chose, clinging to praise they no longer believe, options are everything. So no, I don't run a massive team anymore. I don't sit in board meetings. I don't walk into buildings where my name is embroidered on anything. But when a client calls, they listen. When I speak, they follow. Because they remember who helped them when no one else could. And that's the kind of power they can't replace. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt invisible, if they skipped over your name, overlooked your work, or called your silence weakness, remember this. The title isn't the throne. You are. If you've ever built something that no one clapped for but everyone depended on, drop a key icon in the comments. You're not alone. And here at Revenge Tales, we see you.